maybe we could just start with something that's quite general but might draw out a little bit from you all in terms of why did you go into the area that you are examining at the moment? And perhaps start with Laura, because in a way I feel that yours is a little bit harder for us to get into because it's less, it's not visual, which shows how actually we are so hidebound by our traditions. Of we feel that art has somehow we have to have visual to help us to get into things. And what you were talking about is fascinating and very universal. And I'd just like perhaps for you to draw a little bit of why you got involved with that.
Yeah, that's true that sound art is rarely identified because it has its identity, its own identity has been wrote the last 50 years since John Cage started separating music and art and experimentation. So it's true that it's an undiscovered field of a type of new art we can consider, and it has its own identity itself is confused because it raises from many disciplines, from science, from experimentation, from music, and from visual arts as well. So it's a very exploratory file that I'm very glad to have been introduced here.
Good. The other theme that I see also with this evening, just because of the way that it's been hosted and the participants, is that in your two presentations there was a very strong sense of cultural identity, because both of you are talking about a cultural identity, in both your cases an Indian identity, which is then either in terms of wanting the perception of that culture to be seen in a way that you feel is more authentic, and in yours of bringing a culture to a different or assimilating or evolving a culture outside its own space. How do you feel? Do you feel that with the work that Laura is doing, do you feel that there is any connection in what you're doing and the sort of work that she's doing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like she said, that even the sound labs, it's influenced from the visual arts, and especially in the movement of hand and how that sound is being created from that movement. There's still a lot of visual in it. It's not straightforward, so you can't identify it in one way. But I still feel that there's one of the ways you can use it as to identify different, and how you apply it and how you take it forward. I feel like, because I feel like it's still at the beginning stage. So
yeah, I would agree with that too. And I think the other thing is that you can't help but be influenced by everything that you listen to and watch as well. So one of the interesting things too is that, well, a couple of interesting things is that we produced a concert a few years ago, which we didn't set out to do this, but one of the composers in the audience said this for our ensemble concert, this sounds like John Cage goes Indian classical music. And it was because we had played with electronic ideas, we played with acoustic recordings, whatever the link was, but we'd also seen it as a way to get Indian music to different audiences. So in collaboration with and it's a different field from what you're doing, but with the electroacoustic composer worked with us to take Indian classical sounds and mess with them, you could say. So I think there's always room, especially with Indian classical arts. I think there's not really, it has always evolved. Indian classical arts have always moved outside the boundaries of the tradition and extended themselves.
Would you say that that's because even within India, that the different cultures in India have done that within themselves already? So that I don't know the answer to this, but is that the case, that the different parts of India, different Indian cultures have learnt from and borrowed from each other already, even within India? And
yeah,
so that
definitely.
It's something that has always been part of the evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely for performing arts. You could answer better for visual arts, but I mean, definitely there are very obvious and simple cases of, say, a musician travelling to different parts of India, being influenced, bringing it back, putting it in their own performance. It's done very commonly, actually.
Yeah, I think for visual arts, I think it's happening now. It's more of, like I said, in the Indian type foundry that they're starting. It's just 10 years old. It's not. It's fairly new, and they are incorporating regional languages and different languages within integration of cultures within India itself, and bringing it visually, and bringing it as graphical studies and visual studies. And I think it's happening now, as more than what it was before. So, hoping that it gets better. And like I said, we're trying to get things in the mainstream level. So we're trying to break out that stereotypical and typical ways, whether it's music or even sound, or how we treat sound, or how we listen to those music bars on our speakers and everything. That's also visual design, and that affects on the sound. So I think we're trying to bring that all of these areas and integration of art and design together with music and everything to the mainstream level. And I think we have to constantly do that for the newer generation, because we all are so dependent on Twitter and Instagram, and that is all that we talk about. And that's how we all get connected. So I think we need more and more, because I think people are getting separated out from their communication. So.
Right, so in a way too much communication actually leads to isolation.
Exactly.
Yes. And so what's interesting then with what you're doing, conversely to music and visual arts, which are old traditional arts, is that yours in a way is quite a new art form. And I mean, are you finding that with the developments in technology, as you were saying, you're in the intersection of science and arts, that actually you are, rather than going back to old traditions, you are actually discovering new ways of new types of sounds, of ways of making sound. And how does that, if you take it away from the purely research and look at how you can share that with the world, what sort of means are there, or do you anticipate, in order to be able to share some of the results of the sonic lab, as it were?
Well, from my point of view as a curator, it will specifically build a new way of exhibiting, transforming the exhibition of these new sounds, and is what I say, referencing one of the authors, that this way of distributing new music production is away from capitalism and is away from classic galleries. So it's establishing a new sector that's influenced by new media and open source culture based in community projects, and it's offering new possibilities as well. Of
sharing the work.
Yes.
So you anticipate, or you already share that work through platforms online, and that is that one of the main ways that you disseminate the work?
Yes.
Yes. So building online communities that have access to this. Although I saw in your presentation you actually had what looked very much like a gallery with sound. So where does that fit into?
Yeah, that's more classical gallery, but I think the way, for example, the way of you interact with the object, that is more interactive, and you are part of the experiment. The audiences are not audiences anymore, are practitioners. So there are some barriers that are being broken, and we are trying to establish a new experience, new aesthetic experience of engaging with this sound production. That is not a visual art and is not music, so it's a new experimental field.
Good. And just because of the nature of this panel and the fact that it's been very much anchored from the two of you on a national identity basis, do you feel that the work that you do you feel that that's based at all on any kind of a national, either on purpose or by default because of the people who are involved in that research? Would you say, or is it relevant to say that it's anchored in any kind of national identity or regional identity?
No, not at all. It's Well, there's a debate about genres that is more including female artists. Is more interested in this aspect of Western art and female artists, and is a really inclusive field because it's, as I said, it's from John Cage's 1950s, so it's really open and is very inclusive, and there are no it doesn't point to any type of nationality or yes, it's more
Or tradition. It doesn't come from
no,
a
it's
national
Yeah.
tradition.
maybe Western art, but it's complicated because it has influences of improvisation as well that is more
That come from other.
non-Occidental. So
That's what I was actually thinking too. Similar question: that if you were researching this in a different country, would the approach be different? So does that mean the answer to that is no? Then that it's not different where you research or practice the kind of work you're doing.
don't know. I think it's really influenced by media technologies. So what it really gives it a corpse is this way of technological art based. So it depends on how the history of your labs had grown and experience with music and technology is what gives an experience of a sonic lab nowadays. So it depends mainly of this intersection of music and technology. It's something that has grown. Well, it's growing. For example, in Africa now there are so many open labs that they are growing, and so the experience is happening as well. So we can say that it's an international experience with open source, especially that they try to break these borders of national broad art, and they try to the community of open source. It's specifically that is internationally, and it grows everywhere.
And just a point that I was interested that you said about women being particularly interested in this field. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that that's happened?
Well, there is a big part of research that is very inclusive in sound art. That is these genre studies that they are interested in music, and I don't know. There is a movement of recovering all the artists that pioneers that were females, and it's really inclusive.
Good. Okay, we've got about another 15 minutes, I think, left, or a little bit less, more like 12 minutes. Would anybody like to ask any questions of the panel or have any contribution they'd like to make to the discussion? Really not? Well, we'll have to talk amongst ourselves a little bit more then. Since this is for an audience as well, for the benefit of people here, I think you've given a really interesting and very wide spectrum, and leading to your kaleidoscope idea again of different parts of arts and culture. What would you like our audience to take away from tonight's discussion? Because I think a lot of what you do as artists anyway is you're communicators. So you don't just do these things for yourselves, you do these things for audiences. So I'd be interested if you could share perhaps a little bit of what you each feel that you would like the audience to have to go away with from tonight.
I would definitely suggest that if people can digest information before, like, take it in and understand it and see it from a different perspective every time you get something, even for the Tarang music or the Sonic Labs or any of the art installations or anything. Whatever information that you get, study it if you can and understand it from different perspectives before you say that this is what I want, this is what I like, or this is what how an Indian should look like, or this is how a sound should sound like. You know, that's how we should hear it. I think that sort of a understanding within a person should have that, and have that capability to before you get that information and then digest it, I guess.
So having an open mind,
exactly,
and a questioning mind, and not to have any prejudgments about what you're saying.
Yes,
and
definitely.
And then trying to...
I think that will help break the stereotypical. Every time we talk about the same thing, we see the same imagery. Yesterday I was with my sister and we saw this ad on the bus, on one of the bus. It was about the Rajasthan ads, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the same thing that they're showing it all over again. Can we see something different? Can we see something that's out there and create images, like creating sound? Like, you are absolutely creating something that doesn't exist, and that's what the beauty is. And you're doing the same thing. You're creating music that doesn't exist. Yes, it has influences from culture or from science or from media. For me, the influence is probably Picasso or someone, but we all are creating something different and new, and that is what we all should be doing it, and that's how we all should be taking things forward.
Okay. Laura?
Well,
it doesn't have to be a big discussion.
I don't know. As a curator and working with Sonic Labs, what I'm interested in showing is showing this process in art in general, that is expressing this connection that is the natural cultures we are in with. So this connection that as humans we have from nature to culture, and show this process is in an exhibition lab, and getting this experience that we belong to this nature and we do this culture. And I think that is very important to respect our environment and think about climate change, and I think that this is very important nowadays, and that's what I'm trying to create in my exhibitions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting what you were talking to Laura about, and what you mentioned about what we had seemingly anchored on cultural identity. Actually, for me, it's interesting that it comes across like that, because it's actually not just about cultural identity. The point of the work that we're doing is to make sure that, to show and demonstrate that it can be for everyone and anyone. It's not belonging to a particular region or a people or a purpose. So it's really...
I think that's clear, sorry just to interrupt, but I think it still comes from that the source of it is a cultural identity. I don't think your talk didn't come at all as a protective cultural. On the contrary, it shows the evolution of a culture that, when it's implanted somewhere else, becomes other. Which is what
of course, and that's exactly what. So the main point and the main message we would like to always convey with Tarang and with the work that we're doing is that it is art which can really break down barriers. It can make sure that there are less labels on people, that there are fewer ways of saying that you're different from me, you're also different. So that's really the main point of all this, is that we are really all the same. We're all really just trying to be inspired by our surroundings, by people, by places, and by ideas, and then express ourselves. And so we would always like that people should be inspired by what we can do and then express themselves then as well.
Great. Well, I mean, I think that's very clear, and it's a very positive message also from Laura. Also came very clearly as universality, in the sense that all of the arts that you are involved in, anything that you see around you that's to do with arts and culture, in the end it is about, from what you're saying, very much about universality. We have more in common than we have in differences, and that really through art it's an opportunity to be taken out of your everyday life when you don't work with art, and to be able to question and to have an open mind and to find these things for yourself in the various art forms that these three participants have been talking about, and that all the other artists that create also produce. So I'd like to thank Laura, Alok and Smrita so much for your contributions.